Hello, everyone. I am Opelia, born and reared in Maryland, a tranquil region characterized by tree-lined avenues and extended sequences. I resided there, dedicating most of my time. My mother was a lady of refinement during my childhood, perpetually smiling at me from the early dawn while she was preparing breakfast until dusk in the cherished compact kitchen. My father, a man of few words, was consistently diligent and accountable in his efforts. In my memory, everything was perfect, or so I thought. However, at the age of 15, my world abruptly collapsed, and my mother succumbed to a brief and abrupt illness so quickly that I was unaware of what had happened. As events unfolded, the sensation of void intensified. I saw my father succumb to loneliness in a previously abundant residence, with persistence in life and laughter. We were no longer the family we once were. Each morning, I attended school. The night I returned home, nothing had changed. The kitchen prepares the same uncomplicated foods, although my mother was no longer present at every dinner. It was just the two of us, but the distance between my father and me gradually grew larger than the size of the house. And when I turned 18, my father's remarriage was a surprise to me, even though I knew he deserved to be content once more with his new wife, my stepmother. She was a benevolent and compassionate woman. She gave birth alongside her son, Lucien, who was only 1 year old at the time. It felt strange that they were younger than me. It felt as if my life had reversed and deteriorated again. My circumstances had drastically altered, and I felt a sense of peace. It was recognized, however, that at the age of 15, my world abruptly disintegrated. My mother deceased following a brief and abrupt disease that progressed so rapidly that I did not even understand the circumstances, and the sensation of emptiness intensified as I observed my father's transformation. We found ourselves alone in a once abundant and laughter-filled house, but by the time morning arrived and I went to school, we had transformed into a different family. Upon my return home that night, everything remained unchanged. The kitchen still prepared the same simple meals, but my mother was no longer present at every dinner, consisted of merely 2 individuals. Still, the distance between my father and me gradually grew. At first, I consistently felt uncomfortable in the house. He was making an effort to fit in with this new, younger demographic, even though he had no prior experience that could cause discomfort. He remained silent, perhaps mirroring my state of acclimating to the unfamiliar. The evening situation is comprehensive. The family would assemble in the living room. Father and stepmother conversed below. Regarding work or plans, Lucien and I exchanged glances with a subtle bewilderment that compelled me to quickly disappear. My family's meals were consistently identical, slowly transforming into an opportunity for us to foster a deeper acquaintance. Yet, curiously, Lucien frequently acquired provision for me, a minor act that impacted my experience slightly typically. He was consistently reticent and refrained from conversation often, although at times he provided me with an extended more stare than usual. I contemplated whether I was excessive sensitivity or merely a younger brother's emotions toward his younger brother. However, it was indisputable that as time elapsed, an underlying presence persisted. The tension between us was that neither party discussed the emotions that ought to have been merely sisterly, but when did it evolve into anything more? It was difficult to pinpoint specific moments throughout the day when I suddenly felt my heartbeat pound. My heart raced in proximity to Lucien, and I wouldn't say I liked that sensation. Despite the loathing I felt for him, I started to see him as more than just a nighttime companion. With soft footsteps echoing down the hallway, Lucien crept into my room. Typically, we would engage in a succinct dialogue. Before he went back to his room, though, he sat for a longer time than usual. His eyes fixed me intently, as if he wanted to explain an unexpected situation that left me speechless. I perceived the ambiance between us. Oddly, the oppressive silence persisted. I felt perplexed and, before my contemplation, inclined my head slightly, beckoning him to remain for a brief period longer. We sat in the darkness in the muted illumination, surrounded by 2 strangers who, for some reason, found Lucien irresistible. My brother possessed a certain handsomeness that I was unable to overlook. At times, I pondered whether I ought to experience emotions. Feeling terrible about it since Lucian was my brother by designation, ultimately excluding those thoughts were frequently ephemeral and disregarded by more rational justifications, such as proximity residing in the same domicile, or the concord of two young individuals residing in terminated, slept in different spaces, albeit in proximity. Rooms were on the second floor. In contrast, my father and stepmother slept on the first floor, which occasionally led to Lucian and me encountering unpleasant situations at crucial moments. I was a first-year college student while he was a senior in high school, fully engaged and prepared for important examinations. While we were trying to adjust to our new routine, there was an undeniable tension between us. There were evenings after school when we would sit on the sofa in front of the television, creating a soft glow in the living room. Despite this, we both remained silent and uncertain. Not only did a sense of normalcy acknowledge my feelings for Lucian, but I was unsure of how to express them. These feelings were genuine and extended beyond the boundaries of familial affection. The sensation perplexed me, yet I could not refute the assertion that each time I encountered Lucian, my heart beat quicker during moments we encountered inadvertently on the staircase. When our eyes met, there was an enigmatic quality in his gaze that I could not ignore. It was a peaceful evening. Any other evening, I suspected it wouldn't end the way my parents had, with a 5-day journey departing from Lucian. I was initially alone at home, and we expected it to be a break under adult supervision. That evening, we convened in the living room. Neither of us found the idea of starting a romantic film particularly engaging. In an attempt to find something to occupy our time, I prepared some dried squid. After a hectic week, I indulged in a small quantity of fruit and several cans of beer, making the film initiation rather simple. We were seated. We were deep in our usual conversation. However, a brief conversation and gentle laughter pierced the silence of the residence. Later, the film presented an unexpected scene of a couple fervently embracing one another for unknown reasons, to which we both succumbed. Silence. Laughter had ceased. The unconcerned dialogue between Lucian and me abruptly grew congested. It ceased to be the solace of two sisters sharing uncomplicatedly the instant I sensed Lucian's gaze upon me, longer than the customary glance, and an intense sensation began to disseminate throughout my body. Yet I remained silent, merely seated while holding a beer can in my hand as a means of retention, composed before I comprehended what Lucian had embraced me. The movements were vigorous and unforeseen, enticing. His kisses were intense, unleashing all the long-suppressed emotions. I was unable to resist. My heart was tumultuous, but my body responded in a different way. We had transcended the limits. That moment of fraternal affection, instantaneous in the darkness and silence of the room that night, was no longer ordinary. The night marked a critical turning point, a metamorphosis that I understood would never repeat the events of that evening. No constraints could refute the fact that I had experienced a profound break. I gave in to my emotions, allowing what shouldn't have happened throughout the entire night. Lucian and I bonded, surpassing all boundaries, and we didn't engage in extensive conversation about everything. It seemed to happen instinctively, fueled by a repressed desire for prolonged intimacy that we strove to uphold. But emotions supplanted it. We were unable to recall the control clearly. Anticipating the next day, as the gentle sunlight streamed through the curtains, I lay beside Lucian in the room reserved for me, the peaceful place to sleep. My surroundings remained unchanged. Like every other day, the room was silent. The light was warm, but within, something had completely changed. We remained mostly silent, only briefly exchanging glances. It's possible that we both understood it at this point in our lives and will no longer repeat it in the days to come, as my father and stepmother were still traveling a significant distance. We persisted in savoring that moment. It had now passed. Nevertheless, the feeling of awkwardness exists paradoxically in a state of comfort, as if we were a pair. Liberated from intrusive observation, individuals in love ceased to be familial for others. Dinners became intimate moments for Lucien and me alone. We convened each night, saw films, conversed, and ultimately concluded the night in the identical bed. During those days, I permitted myself to disregard reality and neglect that Lucien and I were merely siblings in the name we inhabited throughout that period, as though we were a youthful, liberated couple, devoid of any concerns arising regarding the occurrence of events, thus inherently rapidly that I was unable to altitude the sensation of being overwhelmed through our clandestine affection and prolonged evenings. Eventually, the day arrived when my parents re-entered upon their arrival. The household resumed its normal state. Lucien and I reinstated our positions. We pretended to be sisters under one roof. Nothing transpired, as though everything the personal encounter was ephemeral. I dreamt that my parents remained oblivious to their actions. While they conversed and expressed joy on their travels, Lucien and I remained seated, exchanging quiet glances, mindful that our secret must remain eternal. Over the next few months, we witnessed each other continuing our covert relationship in confidence. The secret meetings and long, sleepless nights started to become routine. Whenever my parents retired for the night, Lucien would leave early or go out, enter my chamber stealthily. We would embrace one another as though there had never existed obstacles separating us throughout the day in the U.S. We endeavored to maintain normalcy. Family meals persisted as customary, and my parents remained unaware. Lucien and I merely established eye contact. This concealed strain rendered me breathless. I couldn't breathe, but at the same time I could. The guilt was slowly eroding me, but it wasn't strong enough to compel me. I surrendered my efforts and continued to live. Despite the clandestine events that occurred each night, every moment with Lucien became so familiar that I feared I would be unable to escape. I realized that I could no longer tolerate this relationship. I began taking birth control, provide contraceptive tablets discreetly and meticulously. Unbeknownst to others, I harbored trepidation around the implications of this link. However, instead of ceasing, I chose to exercise control. I endeavored to persuade myself that it was still achievable. We would never have existed. Almost a year later, Lucien graduated and proceeded to college. He left his home and moved to a different city to continue his education after Lucien's graduation. Despite my reluctance to acknowledge that the barrier between us created difficulty, I anticipated that our connection would alter. No more clandestine evenings, no more tranquil moments together. The separation compelled us to place that friendship on hold. Although I still feel burdened by nostalgia after my graduation, I resolved to seek a novel trajectory for my life. I submitted an application for employment as an office employee in a digital environment. The position at the corporation was unremarkable. However, it provided me with stability apart from the days of turmoil and emotional distress. In the midst of the chaos, I met him, the man who forever changed my life. He owns a sizable, expansive hair salon in the city and is a calm, charismatic individual. During the initial meeting, his power and tenderness struck me. He was unlike anyone I had encountered before, and every gaze he directed towards me instilled a sense of safety in me, an experience I had never had before. Over the years, we have developed a profound love. Almost immediately, everything unfolded naturally, as if fate had brought us together soon after our marriage, and we began to build the family life I had always dreamed of. Having a kid together is complete. Days spent with him and the child are significant. I momentarily forget the agonizing memories of the past. Occasionally, they resurface to torment me during moments of vulnerability. I realized I had discovered a new sanctuary, individuals deserving of affection and esteem. However, in the recesses of my mind, the recollection of Lucien and those clandestine days had not entirely vanished. I contemplated whether I would ever genuinely forget everything. Still, I had a family to protect, and that was the most important thing. However, a deep part of me still harbored shame about my husband. despite the fact that he was an exceptional individual who consistently showed genuine affection and concern. Every time I looked into his eyes, I felt a weight on my heart, as if I were hiding a part of my past that he should own. I am uncertain whether I should disclose this information to him. Regarding my history with Lucien, my contemplation sometimes prevents me from sleeping, leaving me torn between divulging all information or maintaining this confidentiality. Occasionally, I worry that you may no longer view me in the same light if I reveal the truth. Once more, all that we have constructed, the small family value could disintegrate due to an admission. Nonetheless, persisting in concealing this secret is akin to a boulder pressing against me each day. It evokes a sensation of inadequacy within me. I deserve the affection he holds for me, but I'm unsure of the right path to follow. I find myself at a fork in the road, unsure of which path to choose. After hearing my story, you may condemn me for harming many people due to my past mistakes, but I can only ask, what would you do? Would you reveal the truth despite the potential for disruption, or would you choose to remain silent? Opt to remain silent. Let the past delve profoundly into your recollection, anticipating that it will never return to harm the individuals you know. Dear, I anticipate your guidance. How would you handle my situation in the comments below? I admit everything, face the consequences, or maintain this confidentiality to protect my possessions. I value any counsel, empathy, or criticism due to my position at a crossroads, uncertain of which path to take.